year of high school was probably the best year I had in high school. That was the year I came into my own. When the school season began in September, I knew something special was going to happen when my friend Tony, who played alto sax, was talking to me and said, "Hey, I'd like to form a jazz band, a jazz group, separate from the high school, just a bunch of us to get together and play, and possibly gig." And I asked him, "Great, sounds nice," as he's talking about this. "Who are you going to get to play drums?" And he looked at me like I just asked him the dumbest question in the world. He basically said, "You, of course. Who do you think?" And then for tenor sax, we were going to get our friend Eddie Ramos. For trumpet, we got our friend Marcos Rodriguez. For piano, we didn't have a bass player, and we didn't know who we would get. So we decided to, we would get a piano player that would be able to at least play the bass lines while he's comping chords. And we heard about this foreign exchange student from Holland. And the first day of actual jazz band rehearsal, I won't forget this, the first day of jazz band rehearsal, I see this tall kid, blonde-haired, blue-eyed kid on the piano, and we did a song called Girl Talk. I'm sure you've heard it if you're into jazz. And when it came time for the solo, Mr. Neergaard, our jazz band director, basically pointed to the kid, who we found out his name was Mark. "Hey, Mark, why don't you take it?" So the solo time comes around. Time for solo comes around. I'm looking at him. I'm like, "What do you know about jazz, dude? What do you know about jazz?" And it's a slow swinging ballad. And then the solo comes up. I'm looking at him. I think all eyes were on him. And all of a sudden, like, and our mouths just went. That day, the Phase 5 Jazz Quintet was born. Probably some of the best times in my life was with those guys in school. And when we got together to play, Tony on alto sax, Eddie on tenor sax, Marcos on trumpet, Mark on piano, and myself on drums, some sort of strange magic happened. That's what I remember it as. Just, we clicked. We were tight. You would not know that that myself, Eddie, and Marcos were juniors in high school, that Tony was a sophomore, and Mark was a senior. You would not know that. You would not know that we were high school students. That's how good we are. And I'm not just saying that because I was in the band and I'm looking at the year of 90/91 with rose-colored glasses. It's one of the huge what-ifs of my life. What if certain things didn't happen? What if the hand of fate didn't come and do what it did? And of course, we got the support from our beloved band director, Mr. Paris. Of course, jazz was not his thing. The first gig we played that was not a Lincoln Park High School jazz band gig was at the teacher's Christmas party. And boy, did it create some controversy. Oh, it created controversy. Certain teachers were not going to show up because we were kids, students. We're not supposed to see the teachers drinking and smoking and swearing, even though the English teacher who made a big stink about it was a swearer in her classroom. But we were there. We showed up, and even the way we presented ourselves there was not like high school kids. We came in, we set up our stuff, and we had a repertoire all picked out. We always began with a ballad. And the ballad was self-portrait in 3 colors. And we just did straight-ahead jazz. We were doing the Charlie Parker songbook. We were doing the Ellington songbook. We were doing... we were pretty much that bebop era with some ballads thrown in. and occasionally Tony, myself, and Mark would do take 5. And we got in there, we played, and Mr. Paris, this was around the Christmas time of 90. We went back to Mr. Paris's beautiful townhouse in Lincoln Park, where we had pizza. We were paid in pizza. And man, I loved his townhouse. And our next gig after that was a bookstore at Water Tower Place for you Chicagoans out there that no longer exists. It was Rizzoli Bookstore. And man, we had the bookstore at its feet. It was a Sunday afternoon where it was hopping. And we did 3 sets and took a break. 3 sets. And we were just, I think it was 3 sets. We were just killing it, man. We were just killing it. Now's the time. We were just on point. And again, we got paid in pizza, which was perfectly fine. We just wanted to play. That's all we wanted to do. We would cut class. And I went to a fine arts high school, but my school was not like LaGuardia in New York. It was a school that had a fine arts program, which no longer exists. Cut class and go to the band room. Get out the equipment and start jamming. One of the movies we all had loved at the time was Spike Lee's Mo Better Blues with Denzel Washington. And we had wanted to, I kind of always fancied us wanting us to be the Bleak Quintet. And we would go to the band room and cut class and jam. I remember one time myself and Mark cut 4 periods because we were doing this non-stop jam. Him on the keyboards and me on the drums. And we had our disagreements. You know, we didn't know how to communicate. Myself and Mark had a couple of battles, especially I remember the one particular. Mark just saw a documentary on Art Blakey and he wanted me to play like Art Blakey, and I had to explain I'm not Art Blakey. He wanted me to. He was pointing out that Art Blakey would do a roll, a crescendo decrescendo, before you go into a solo, and he wanted me to do that. And I'm like, but I'm not feeling that. That's not what I'm feeling. That's what Art Blakey feels. I'm not Art Blakey. So I mean, communication was not what it was, but we loved each other. And then we had our guest vocalist, Michelle Thomas. And Michelle, whenever we needed a vocalist, we always had her. And she's still a great singer. And of course, at times Mr. Paris will allow us to take part of the drum kit and play at a cafe in the Lincoln Park neighborhood that's no longer there. It's now a Starbucks. At the time it was called Cafe Trevi. It was a local cafe. And then we loved each other. We were a unit. Like the Beatles were the 4-headed monster, I called us we were like the 5-headed monster. And a couple things just couldn't keep it together. Mark had to go back to Holland after his school year because he was about to go to university. But the biggest change that happened, the biggest blow to that, was what happened to Tony at the beginning of the 91-92 school season. He had just started his junior year. Myself, Eddie, and Marcos were starting our senior year. And to this day, I remember I worked at a West Coast video store. And we had a meeting on Saturday morning, and my mom had called me and said, hey, Brian, are you all done? I said, yeah, I'm all done. Okay, hurry up and get home immediately. Okay, I got home. I ran home about 5 blocks. I ran home. And I got in and I said, okay, what's up? I thought it was my grandfather, because my grandfather was sick in the early stages of pulmonary fibrosis. And my mom said to me, sit down. I'm like, what's going on? Is it Grandpa? Just sit down. Okay. Tony was killed last night driving home from work in a bad car accident. Now, I had just seen Tony on Thursday. We were both off school on Friday because he had a performance with the Chicago Youth Symphony. Tony was doing a lot of things music-wise in the city. He was with the Chicago Youth Symphony. He was with the Merit Music Program. Let's face it, Tony was going to be big in music. I just saw him. What do you mean? And I was invited to go to a birthday party that Eddie had, and I called him Eddie. He didn't know about it yet. I told Eddie, and I think Eddie passed it on to everybody else at the party. I didn't go to his party. I basically, when things like that happen, I just want to totally be alone. And I was alone. And the way I deal with things is that I try and find an excuse to spend money. Which is what I did. But I basically, other than that, I want to be alone. And it was just never the same. We kept the combo going the next year. We actually got a bass player in Roy Skeets. We had another great keyboard player in Herman Little. And we actually got to play the spring assembly at school. We did the previous year, but this time we got to do it during school hours. And my senior year was pretty much a strange time anyways, but that's another story. But I think a lot of us could say that the magic happened, the real magic happened our junior year. Not to say that what happened the way we were in 91, 92 was bad, because it was still good and had its own magic in its own right. But I think when I look back at my junior year and how fun I was, it was just us five. And man, we could make music together. We were able to speak a language to each other in music that, you know, that as much as I love the people I'm with now, and I love them, I miss those guys. I miss playing music with those guys. I would give anything to play with Mark, who's doing things in Europe right now, Eddie, who's still playing in Chicago. I still play, even though it's primarily Beatles and rock and roll. I still play. Michelle Thomas still sings, so if we need a vocalist, we have Michelle Thomas. If we need a bass player, we still have Roy Skeets. And even Herman from our second incarnation of Phase 5, which is what we called ourselves, is still doing music. It's only Marcos who put his trumpet down and doesn't play trumpet anymore. So Marcos, you need to pick that trumpet up again and start playing. You know you still got it. You never lose it. You never lose it. I love those guys. I love the memories of Phase 5, the Phase 5 Jazz Quintet.
You